Today I want to take just a moment and introduce to you our very special guest speaker today. We are excited and pleased to have Dr. Chris Lieberman with us. Chris is my friend, and he is somebody I've been excited for him to come. He currently serves as the director of the Office of Cooperative Program Ministry for Texas Baptists, or the Baptist General Convention of Texas. The cooperative program, as you know, is the funding ministry of Texas Baptists. Through the cooperative program, churches of all sizes have opportunity to minister to lost people in Texas, North America, and around the world. Chris has served with Texas Baptists for almost 33 years. His previous roles include Director of Human Resources, Associate to the Executive Director, and Director of Church Ministry Resources. He also served as Director of Disaster Recovery for Texas Baptist. I'm going to pause right there, and I'm going to tell y'all that where I really got to know Chris more than any place else, and I don't even know if you remember this, was after Hurricane Rita. Yeah. Chris came and sat in our church's area, and I took him around, showed him all the damage we had to our church, and then he helped me find the resources that we needed in order to help recover, not just us, but a lot of other churches. And so, yes, that was a very important time for us. From 1984 to 1999, he coordinated the student ministry programs of Texas Baptist, helping to develop two key projects, See You at the Pole and True Love Waits. In addition to his work with the BGCT, Chris serves on the board of the Baptist World Alliance and locally serves on the City of Garland Housing Finance Corporation Board. He has served as adjunct faculty in the School of Christian Studies at Dallas Baptist University for almost 25 years. Chris is a graduate of Howard Payne University. We'll forgive that. I went to a fine Baptist school too. North of here, Bob. He has earned his graduate degree from Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary and received an honorary doctorate of humanities from HPU in 2006. Now, I'm going to read this next part. I'm going to tell you, I'm jealous. I just want to say this now. Before I read this, I am green with envy. The first week of every April, you will find Chris in Augusta, Georgia, at the Augusta National Golf Club, where he serves as the official scorekeeper on the 9th hole for the Masters Golf Tournament. Stop it. Chris is married to Cindy Hughes Lieberman, and they are parents of 2 adult sons who have given them 2 beautiful daughters-in-law and 4 fabulous grandchildren. We are so grateful to have our friend from Texas Baptist with us today, Dr. Chris Lieberman. Dr. Chris, come and lead us.
Thank you. With an introduction like that, I can hardly wait to hear what I have to say. I need to take you with me everywhere I go. Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me come today. I have a full disclosure. I have been at home sick all week. I'm not sick today, but you're my first trip out since that time, and I'm realizing as a senior adult, I don't quite recover like I did when I was in my earlier years, but I am glad to be here. I've got a little sip of water I may have to go to every now and then, but glad to be here and to share with you today. You know, your city, I know it so well from traveling so much. You know, it's the city that so many of us in the North Texas area drive through so many times. Probably, I was trying to figure out an accurate way to estimate it, but it'd have to be dozens and dozens of times I drive through Hillsboro every year, doing my job, heading out and coming back. You know, coming back from down in Corpus Christi, you know, when I get to Hillsboro, I'm home, you know, just a little bit more and I'm there to Garland. And so I always know it that way, but to be able to come today and to speak at your church is just an extra special privilege today to share. That word doctor doesn't get used with my name much. And so I've always kind of feels weird. Nobody in my house calls me doctor. And really nobody in my office calls me doctor. About the only time anybody ever calls me is when somebody's kind enough, like Danny, when I get introduced. But I heard a story about a young preacher He had his doctorate, and he moved to town. He was new. He had a little kindergarten daughter, and she went to school the first day, and the school teacher said, boys and girls, this is Susie. This is Dr. Johnson's daughter. No, he didn't say who Dr. Johnson was, just this is Dr. Johnson's daughter. Well, at recess, all the kids gathered around her and said, well, tell me, your daddy, is he a foot doctor? Is he an ear doctor? Is he throat? What kind of doctor is your dad? And the little girl said very apologetically, oh, no. He's not the kind of doctor that can do you any good. So, I understand completely. One of my worst fears is on an airplane one night, somebody's going to look on a manifest and they put doctor, and there's somebody that needs medical help, and they come expecting me to do that. But we pray that doesn't happen. I want you to turn to the 2nd chapter of the book of Mark. I'm going to be speaking from there eventually this morning. One of the reasons I'm here today, though, is to really pay honor to your church. My job with Texas Baptist is to promote the cooperative program. You've probably heard of the cooperative program in general. In general, you know what it does. Your church specifies a specific amount of money that you send to us in Dallas at the Baptist building, and you say, here is this money. We'd like for you to keep this much to do Texas work, mission work in Texas, and here's this portion we'd like for you to send on to the Southern Baptist Convention. And we've been operating that way for many years. And since 1923-25, when the cooperative program actually began, now quite honestly, Baptists were cooperative in their giving even before that. But Baptists formed this official cooperative program to fund and fuel missions here in Texas, across the United States, and around the world. And we will never know this side of eternity the millions of people who've come to know Christ because of the generosity of churches just like yours. You know, the International Mission Board of Southern Baptist Convention, somewhere around 5,000 missionaries, when you count the international missionaries and the North American missionaries, about 5,000. Those missionaries, just last year in their work, reported over 120,000 professions of faith. Now that's amazing. That's a very easy word, comes off my tongue, 120,000, and kind of flies past us. But that represents 120,000 individuals who will spend eternity in heaven and not in hell. And that happens every year. And so every time you give to the cooperative program, you're a part of that. Here in Texas, we're involved in a lot of things. I think you were to receive a little one card that has kind of a summary of some of the things we do. We couldn't put it on one card. It's just a summary of that. But we're involved in new church starts. Currently, Texas Baptists are involved in about 400 new church starts. Those new church starts, we know that new churches reach lost people quicker, faster, and more efficiently than older existing churches. There are many reasons for that, but it's just a fact that new churches reach lost people much more effectively than any other kind of church. And these 400 churches in the past 5 years, just here in Texas, have seen over 20,000 people come to know the Lord. Through the years in Texas with cooperative program money, we've built these wonderful universities, Baylor University down the road here. You went to a great Baptist school, it just wasn't in Texas. That's where you went wrong. You know, you got Baptist right, you just didn't get the first part right there. But we have these 9 Baptist universities around Texas that we have built through the years. Your cooperative program money has helped to fund those through the years. And about 9,000 students will graduate in the next few weeks from these schools, about 40,000 in these schools. Now, these are 9,000 students who have been under the teaching of predominantly Christian, Baptist Christian professors. where prayer is the rule, not the exception, where talking about the Lord is common, where Bible study and opportunities for evangelism are the rule of the day. And that's the atmosphere these 9,000 kids will be leaving to go out into the world. And what a difference that has to make in our state. We have our child care facilities, our hospitals, our Baptist student ministries around Texas, 116 BSMs around Texas on 116 different campuses. We have 24 buildings that you've helped build over the years, one on every major campus in Texas. And again, thousands of kids who come to know the Lord through that BSM ministry. Texas Baptist Men, our disaster partner here in Texas. And I could go on and on and on, just about bore you to death. But let me just say on behalf of millions who have benefited from your generosity, thank you. Literally millions of people all over the world who've come to know Christ and who will spend eternity there with him because your church said, you know what, we're going to designate a portion of our money and we're going to send it outside of this city and this county. And we're going to send it to the Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts. And for that, I want to say on behalf of many, thank you. Now, your church is a bit unusual. You might have thought that anyway. But your church's giving is amazing. There are 5,000, Pastor, come up here. There are 5,500 Texas Baptist churches. I would say just like yours, but they're also different. It's hard to say just like yours. But many of them are like yours, but there are 5,500 churches here in Texas, many of them worshiping right this very moment. And out of all of those churches, your church is the 154th largest giving church. Now, did that sink in? Out of 5,500, you're the 154th largest gift. That puts you in 2.88% in giving. And I want to present this to you. It says, from Texas Baptist, the Baptist General Convention of Texas, First Baptist Church, Hillsboro, as a top 200 giving church, actually 154, out of 5,500 congregations, presented this day, 6th day of May, my signature and David Hartage. So on behalf of so many, Danny, thanks for leading your church in their giving. We're grateful. You bet. Well, I want to share with you about this great story from Mark, the 2nd chapter. This is a wonderful story. When I saw the kids up here, it reminded me again of when I first heard this story as a young child in Sunday school. We call it beginners and primaries. You remember those terms? Yeah. Even had an intermediate in there somewhere. See some heads nodding back there. I remember the story, and I remember the teacher that told us this story. And she had a picture of this block, adobe-looking house with steps that went up the side. And they told this story about these 4 men that brought their friend to Jesus. I want to take time and read this today. I'm going to be reading from Mark, the 2nd chapter, beginning in verse 1. Read through verse 12. Mark 2, verse 1 through verse 12. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. So many gathered that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Some men came bringing to him a paralytic carried by the 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus, and after digging through it, lowered the mat the paralyzed man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sin but God alone?" Immediately, Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. And he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, get up, take up your mat, and walk. But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I tell you, get up, take up your mat, and go home. He got up, took his mat, walked out in full view of all of them. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. Wouldn't you have loved to have been there that day? Everyone knew this man was a paralytic. He was part of the community. And for the people waiting outside, they just saw these two guys kind of go in front of them, and he goes down the hole in the roof, and the next thing you know, he's walking out the front door carrying his mat. Wouldn't it have been amazing to see that, to be a part of that? Well, this is a great story, and I think that it helps us illustrate a lot of wonderful things about what do we value. This story reminds me of a couple of things that really aren't a part of my 4 points I want to share with you today, but let me just share these 4 kind of curious thoughts I've always had about this passage. Number 1, I've always wondered why these men were nameless. Now, this is a real story. This really happened. And these men, we don't know their names. And I find that interesting when you think about the Bible itself as a book that in most cases, in many cases, goes to extra length to name people. You know, it first name, last name, and even just so you're not confused, he's from this town, and just so long you're not confused, this is his living, this is his vocation. This is such and such from such and such who was a such and such. That's what the Bible did. But yet, why in this case? Now, I don't have an answer to this, by the way. Don't get excited. I don't know, but it's always been curious why we don't know these guys' names. The second thing I've always been curious about this, I wonder how different this story might have been told had it been told from the perspective of the guy that owned that house. Yeah, some of you are getting that. He probably wasn't quite as happy. Somebody busted a hole in his roof that day. Now, we're hoping that these 4 men stayed behind and fixed it. It wasn't a solid roof like this. It was mud and thatch and could have easily could be put back together, and we trust that they did that. The other thing that intrigues me about this is the fact that the Scripture tells us that these 4 men, when they got there was such a crowd they couldn't get in. It doesn't say that they were late or that the crowd had gotten there so much earlier that even when they got there on time, they couldn't get in. But for whatever reason, when they got there, they realized they couldn't get in, and so they figured out a way, climbed the roof. But there were people waiting in line. So in the vernacular of today, what did these 4 men do with their paralytic friend? Yeah, they cut in line. So I wonder how different the story might have been told from those who were waiting in line. And then the last thing, this is just another great example, folks, of the New Testament and the life of Jesus and how he handled interruptions. This was an interruption. But I want you to think back to all the stories of Jesus from the New Testament. Just run those through your mind, the ones you know because you've read the Bible all your life. Many of the stories of Jesus happened when he was interrupted. But I think the truth in this is, how did he always handle that? How did he handle this? Now, this is a sermon to me. How do I handle interruptions? How do you handle interruptions? When I get started tomorrow morning, I'm going to have a list. And I'm going to start checking them off. That's just the way I operate. And many times, if something gets between me and that list, I get upset. But could it be possible, from the example of Jesus, that sometimes those interruptions are God's working in our life? And if we ignore those, we could miss what God has for us for that day. So think about that. Think about that whenever you think about those kinds of things. All right, very quickly, I know our time is fleeting away. I want to share with you 4 quick thoughts about this passage and what these gentlemen knew, what they really understood, what did they value. The first thing that they valued and what they knew is they valued the number 1. If you're taking some notes on the back, I hope you will. These guys valued the number one. They valued one person. They brought this one person to Jesus. They didn't wait. All right, we got this paralytic that needs to be healed, and let's see if we can find a guy that can't talk, and let's get 4 or 5, half a dozen, 6 people, and we'll get them all together and we'll take them to Jesus. They didn't do that. These 4 men valued this one person. They valued this one person to the point that they brought him to Jesus. I go back to the stories of Jesus that I mentioned a minute ago. Those same stories that you thought through where Jesus was interrupted. How many of those dealt with Jesus and another individual? Many of them. Jesus and the woman at the well. Jesus, the woman with the issue of blood. Jesus and Zacchaeus. The list can go on and on. The blind men at the gate. A lot of what Jesus did and was recorded for us to learn from dealt with Jesus dealing with one person. I came to Jesus. I was one person. My dad led me to the Lord. Who led you to the Lord? Who brought you to Jesus? I bet it was one person that was concerned about you, one person, and helped you come to Jesus. That's the way it's usually done. Now, I know we have Billy Graham crusades and we have camps and things where we have people do that, and that is wonderful. But I think the main way, economy-wise, that God brings people to himself is by one person bringing one person. So it begs the question, how many one persons are you bringing to Jesus? Could it be possible that there's that one person that's somewhere in the scope of your life, the landscape of your life, a neighbor, a friend, a relative, someone who you work with? That one person, God is depending on you being the one to bring the one to Christ. If they're going to come to know the Lord, it's going to be through you. Is that going to happen? I sure hope so. Second thing I want you to know that these guys knew is that they valued cooperation. They cooperated together. They worked together. They saw their value not in their individuality, but they saw their value and their strength in their unity. They weren't solo acts. They realized that they needed all 4 of those people. One of them couldn't have made that happen. 2 of them couldn't have lowered him to the roof. 3 of them. It took all 4 of them equally to lower that mat and get their friend to Jesus. Just imagine if there was a hole in the roof and these guys were lowering their friend down about to where the chandelier is, and someone stopped and say, "Hey, Mr. Paralytic, of those 4 good friends you have on the roof, which one's your best friend?" He'll be a little hard pressed, wouldn't he? Because all 4 of them were important for that to happen. Cooperation, it's such a beautiful word. It's such a wonderful concept when we cooperate together. You know, I'm glad to be a Baptist. In a day and time when I see numbers of churches that are building and others that are just deciding to take Baptist off the name of their church, I understand the reasons for it, the rationale for it. I just don't get it all the time. You know, when I go to the store and on the aisle there where all the fruits and vegetables are, there's green beans. There's a label on there that says green beans. That way I know when I get home and I open that lid, what's inside? Green beans. I think we have the name First Baptist Church. That's the label out there. They can know what's on the inside. But I'll respect a church's ability to do whatever they want to among a congregation. We're a congregational form of government in the Baptist life. But I kind of lost my thought. I think there goes that medicine kicking in. I'll remember it here in a minute. But I love being a Baptist, and I'm proud of the name. One of the reasons I love to be a Baptist is this book right here. We believe in this book. We believe this book is true. It's real. It's 100%. If it says it in the book, it happened. We don't doubt that. And we've always been that way. Since 1609, when Baptists began to form, we've always built our beliefs and our church and all that we do on Scripture, that it is truth without any error. And in a time when many mainline denominations are fading from that, I'm proud that Baptists have said, nope, this is a stake. We're going to stay right here. We believe this. And I'm proud of that. It gives me comfort. It gives me stability in that, so I'm proud. But I'm also proud of Baptists for our cooperation. I mentioned some things to you earlier about how we cooperate together and all the things that we do to cooperate. Baptists have learned the value of cooperation. And through 5,000 churches here in Texas with the BGCT and 45,000 Baptist churches in the Southern Baptist Convention, Baptists have been able to do some amazing things. And I spouted off a bunch of numbers to you, statistics, and I meant to impress you. I mean, I want to impress you, not in a vain way, but I want you to realize that this close to $78,000 a year, when you add up all of your missions money that you send away from this church, 78,000 every year. For every year I can look back in the records, you've done that. I want you to know that that money is being used well, that people are coming to know Christ because of it. So I make no bones about trying to be impressive. But I could share with you statistics until your eyes roll back. And some of them are beginning to roll now. But you know what? It's really the stories about changed lives that really encourage us and motivate us in that way. Let me tell you a quick story about the cooperative program, Texas Baptist, and one family. The story that I'm going to tell you about began back during Depression years in Big Spring, Texas, way out in West Texas. There was a young girl there in Big Spring, Texas, about 1933. Her name was Ella Taylor. At 8 years of age, she became an orphan. Now, the Taylors' family, they weren't church people. They had no faith. They had no church commitment. They didn't know the Lord. They were just people. But it became evident that she needed a place to go. And there was a Baptist pastor in a Baptist church in Big Spring that knew about a Baptist orphanage in Dallas, Texas called Buckner Orphans Home. You've heard of it. Buckner International today. But back then it was just an orphanage. It was a good-sized orphanage, started by R.C. Buckner, helped supported through the cooperative program from Texas Baptist. No doubt your church in that year was supporting Buckner Orphans Home through your gifts to the cooperative program back in 1933. Well, the pastor in Big Spring took Ella in his car and drove her to Dallas, Texas at 8 years of age and placed her in that orphanage. That's where she grew up for about 10 more years till she graduated from high school. Well, within just a few months of this, on the other side of the state in Kilgore, East Texas, there was a young man named James, and he was standing at the edge of the grave of his father. His mother had died a year previously, so there he was, an orphan, no place to go. Same situation. James's family had no faith background. But you see, Buckner wasn't an orphanage for Baptist orphans. It was an orphanage for vulnerable children, children in need. Well, this time it was the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Kilgore that knew about Buckner. He took James, drove him personally to Dallas, and placed him in the orphanage. Well, Ella and James came to that orphanage within just a few months of each other. And you would think that they would know each other, and they did. They grew up together knowing each other. And junior high school, they started dating, or I don't know if you date in an orphanage, but whatever that romance looked like in an orphanage, they started to fall in love. Well, in the orphanage, when you graduated from high school, that's when you left and were on your own. So this is a picture, I think. If it'll wake up. There you go. That is a picture of Ella and James about when they were graduating from high school at Buckner and about the time they got married. Well, they graduated from high school, got married, moved to East Dallas, bought a little home there, started their careers, joined a Baptist church there, started their ministries there, being involved as lay people in Munger Avenue Baptist Church there in the East Dallas, not too far from Baylor Hospital, the State Fair of Texas, kind of in that area. And they started their life together, their ministries, their careers, and they started their family. And you know what was a product of their marriage just a few years later? Me. I've just told you the story of my mom and dad. I really believe this cooperative program works. It really does work. You see how it's worked for my family. That Baptist, and no doubt this church, provided a place for my mom and dad to grow up. During Depression years, when things were tough for everyone, my mom and dad probably had more than most in an orphanage. Food, lodging, health care, clothing, all these great things that Baptists provided for my mom and dad because of the generosity and the mission spirit of so many churches like yours. But I want to tell you, the best thing that Buckner provided for my parents was not the things I've already listed, as good as they are. The best thing Buckner provided was an opportunity for them to meet Jesus. And they did. Now, they might have found the Lord had they stayed where they were. They certainly weren't on that track. But because of the track God put them on, they came to know the Lord. And what did they do with that? Well, they passed it down to their children. That's our family back in the 60s, getting ready to go to church. My two sisters, my little brother, my mom and dad. That's me there. White shirt. It took about a half a jug of that sticky wax stuff to get that to stand up in front like that. But I got it done every Sunday morning. They passed it down to us. And what did we do with it? We passed it down to our children. That is every descendant of the James and Ella Liebram family at my mother's 90th birthday party. She's since gone to heaven. But there are 29 people in that picture. Every one of age, a believer. Every one. And not a nominal Easter, Christmas kind of church member. I'm talking about ministers and deacons and Sunday school teachers and church treasurers. That's in that crowd. So when someone hears my story and they say, that is a great story about your mom and dad, it really is a great story about my family. Because Baptist provided an opportunity for my whole family to come to know the Lord. And that will continue to happen. And mine is just one of thousands of stories. I'm glad for this cooperation. The third thing I want you to know is that these guys valued innovation. We use the word innovation, we get nervous because innovation sometimes means I've got to change. I'm sure there was a little bit of angst years ago when this was brought into the sanctuary. I just know it was. But we have come to understand that we have to be innovative in our approach. We don't change anything here, but we change our approach. I did not come to know the Lord the way my dad and mom came to know the Lord in their generation. It was different things. It was different music. It was different programs. The way my sons who are in their 40s, wasn't the way I came to know the Lord. I remember the generation before, my parents' generation, talking about brush arbor meetings. Anybody ever heard that term? Several? I don't know anything about those. But that was part of that generation. I suspect brush arbor wouldn't have been a big hit with me. Okay? It just all changes. And what we have to learn is to be innovative and to be open for change, not for our own comfort, but in order to reach people with the gospel. To be innovative in our approach. Last thing I want you to know is that these guys, they understood that it costs for people to come to Jesus. It just flat out cost. Your pastor made the point here with the children this morning. You know, in order for all those seeds to be sown, all those things that farmer does, it costs money. Tractors and fertilizer and all that kind of stuff. If we are going to see people come to Jesus, it's going to cost. It will cost money. Again, I thank you for the generosity of your church to the cooperative program so that we can use that to help spread the gospel. But it's your talents, it's your skills that it's going to cost for people to come to Jesus. One last story, then I'm through. We have in Texas a thing called the River Ministry. No doubt you've heard of that. We're celebrating 50 years this year of the River Ministry. Elman Howe began that. Basically, the River Ministry is a targeted ministry that extends from El Paso to Brownsville on both sides of the border. Currently, Texas Baptists have about 15 full-time missionaries along the border. They're doctors and dentists and social workers and healthcare nurses and all kinds of, and pastors too. All along the border, there'll be a little church, and right beside it may be a dental clinic, or there'll be a church over here on the Mexican side and be a health clinic, and just all kinds of ministry all along the border. Every day for 50 years, you have been supporting that, and people have come to know the Lord. A couple of years ago, we had one of our missionaries who was taking medical supplies across from U.S. to one of the clinics. Our Baptist hospitals here in Texas have supplies that are out of date that they can't use, but they're still perfectly good and legal to use in Mexico. So we take those supplies to help fund those clinics in Mexico. They were taking a truckload across the border, as he had done dozens of times. He crossed the American side. When he got to the Mexican side, the guard there said, "I can't let you bring those supplies over today." And the guy, knowing the guard for so many years, said, "Well, this is crazy. Why?" Of course, this guard hadn't made that decision. Somebody else had made that decision, and he was enforcing it. He said, "I don't know. I just said that I was not to let you take those supplies into Mexico." Our missionary said, "Well, that's crazy. These people need those. There's some waiting on it right now." And the guy said, "I can't let you go." Well, our missionary said to his friend, the Mexican guard, "Well, this is silly. What are you going to do if I keep going? Shoot me?" And the guard said, "No, I wouldn't do anything that drastic over a truckload of bandages. But I have been told that if you keep going, I'm to follow you. And when you get to the church where you drop those off, I'm to arrest that pastor and put him in jail." So our guy wasn't going to do that. So he turned around and went back to the United States. A couple of days later, he was in a meeting with several Hispanic pastors and that particular pastor that was pastor of that church where he was headed that day. And at a break, he went to him and he told him that story. He said, "Hey, I was going to bring you those supplies. Let me tell you what happened. I got there and the guy said that I couldn't bring it over, and that if I insisted and brought it over, he was going to follow me and he was going to put you in jail. So I didn't bring him. I came back." That pastor, that Hispanic pastor, responded to our missionary and said this: "You go get those supplies, and if you feel safe, you bring those across the border, and when you get to the Mexican side, just keep on coming, let that guy follow you, and bring us those supplies." And then he said, "I haven't had the opportunity to preach in that jail for over 3 years." He understood what it meant, cost. That it was going to cost for people to come to know the Lord, particularly in that jail. And what was the cost? It wasn't money. It was his freedom. Now, certainly he wouldn't have been there a long, long time, I wouldn't suspect. But any time for your freedom to be taken away from you is important. Well, these are great guys, a great story. I'm sure there's other things, but maybe I can leave these four with you that these guys valued one. How are you doing on bringing ones to Jesus? These guys value cooperation. We can do more together than we can ever do by ourselves. These guys valued innovation. They were always thinking, what can we do to reach people in an innovative kind of way? And the last thing, they understood that it was going to cost for people to come to know the Lord.